Okay, I get it. You guys want to see the second part of this, alright? Jeez. Alright. You know the deal. The video got popular, and people requested in a lot of railroads that I forgot to feature. So, yeah, I might as well give you guys the long-awaited sequel. This is What Your Favorite Railroad Says About You, Part 2. You know the deal. I'm not presenting facts here, I'm just presenting my own takes on what people like about these railroads, so don't go attacking me in the comments, okay? Now then, let's begin. Most people tend to think about it for the Empire Builder or Big Sky Blue, or the Cascade Tunnel perhaps. But you'll like them for the steam locomotives and, need I mention the electrics? You're likely located around the Chicago area, or in the state of Illinois, foaming over GEVOs around Blue Island. I'm guessing you know about them than just EP5s, or the I5s, or the McGinnis scheme, right? Your favorite animal is likely an eagle, and you love the blue diesels. But I'm gonna be honest, the steam locomotives look hella nice, especially those mountains like The North Coast Limited is your icon, and the Night Princess is your wife. You're just an extension of a Southern Pacific foamer, with the added bonus of a 484 Northern that's actually pretty goated. Speaking of, you likely knew about them through 819. Mining companies are your favorite niche considering how isolated or interesting they are. Just don't trespass to see them, please. Aside from 610, does anyone really talk about this railroad, like, genuinely? You tend to go with the basic option for steam locomotives, but you dig the John Deere green over the red livery. You're a Northeastern foamer that digs the more simplified paint scheme from its predecessors, and you think that their SD45 fleet slays. You're immediately thinking of the gray and yellow diesels, and you live around Kentucky. Either that or you think about the Big Emma. You often call this the Dixie Line rather than the full name, probably. You remember them more for their interurban services rather than the neon-colored diesels, right? Either that or you just care about the NS Heritage Unit. You tend to forget that the trains are operated on their Amtrak, or you just find the equipment that they roster interesting. I mean, F-59s? Fucking lightweight cars? Like, what? You live around or outside of New York City, and constantly foam over the Heritage Units or the other good stuff that they have. And I'm be honest, I don't blame you on that. Metro North actually pretty goated. You're a Philly foamer while also being a massive pigtail fan and a frequent beach goer. You want to provide as much as possible to those and cooperating with bigger organizations, alongside having some cool shit. And acquiring railroads like the G&W. You live in happy Vancouver, shooting the multitude of F-59 PHIs, and the Glub Shittos. You either despise CN, simp for their 6-axle EMDs, or you just find them interesting due to the roster of hand-me-downs. Or if you're a Chad, you remember the OG Wisconsin Central. You remember them now when they roster Triclops locomotives. But do you remember when they rostered F-45s? And by the way, for both of these railroads, you live around Wisconsin or Upper Illinois. You have a burning hatred for BNSF, and loved them when they were still using a fuck ton of SC-45s and F-45s. You tend to go for more niche fallen flags, but you're low-key chill with liking a 4-lone coal and steel hauling railroad in the Northeast. Let's be real. You know about this railroad thanks to its ties with the New York Central, right? You live in Ohio and foam over the Rio Grande tunnel motors that they have, or you're just addicted to rewatching Unstoppable. Just like a Rio Grande foamer, you're a massive heist simp. Fan. Heist fan, that's what I said. You live in Upper Minnesota and probably chase iron ore trains daily with CN painted EMDs, or you just love their Yellowstones. You dig the old paint scheme before a certain company bought them out. You're a Chad, the liquid Chris of Norfolk Southerns out there. The one with good motive power, decent history, and didn't blow up towns and ruin people's lives. Unlike that fake imposter, you're a Midwestern urbanist that wishes that they kept the street running section open or that they never bought diesels. Can I imagine what an E60 would look like hauling freight service? Oh wait, You spend all of your parents' retirement fund on riding crowded light rails or buses just because. You're a Bay Area foamer that only started loving the F40s once they were retired, right? And you want those electrics to burn in hell. You watch CoasterFan 2105 and are a massive SoCal foamer. You got into them through a faker and then through a scenic railroad. I mean, does anyone even talk about the Western Maryland's actual steam locomotives? Or forget that one of them is actually preserved? You chose one of the more underrated fallen flags. A goated CN subsidiary with a banger-ass paint scheme for its diesels. You, my man, earned the deepest respects with this being your personal favorite. Did Jared get you into this railroad because of how quirky it operates? I mean, I don't blame him. Switchers leading road trains is kinda batshit crazy. You remember them for the tunnel motors, but do you remember their Chinese Mikado, the motor cars, the Alcos, the Dash 8s, or his SE70Ms that got butchered by NS? You're a hardcore foamer for 2102, and you believe that anthracite coal is like a certain drug that I probably cannot name on video. You're a New England foamer that is a tree hugger. Or you remember when people memed the hell out of that one locomotive. Do you remember them for the blue and red liveries? Or do you remember the steam or electric operations they once did? You hate Canadian Pacific, and mostly remember them in the white and red era. Or you've seen 1003 for the umpteenth time or whatever. You remember them for the consolidations, the iron ore trains, or the supposed greens. Or in other words, the U-boats. You're a Detroit foamer, and have a Ford car as means of transportation. You own that one train sim rolled route, or dig the aesthetics of black and gray diesels. You want to isolate yourself from the rest of the world doing your own thing. And that's what makes you captivating. And totally not because you have some cool shit lying around. You remember the passenger colors more, and you love the lore that this quaint Midwestern railroad once held, which I respect that. But damn, they got rid of steam locomotives quite early, didn't they? Much like a Rio Grande foamer, you remember them more for the narrow gauge stuff. But you gotta admit that the standard gauge steam locomotives are a little whack. You just want to hog money and leave everything to die to the point where people have to get your attention through hostage situations. You're a Midwestern Alco fan with a burning desire for road units. You had a steam-loving phase initially, but you went towards diesels after buying a model of one and it hasn't stopped. You praise 1522 and 1630 most of the time, or you recognize the later diesels in that simple but decent paint scheme. Also, damn, the Frisco was generous with preservation. You've name-dropped the Cannonball or mentioned their Hudsons a multitude of times. Although mad respect if you're interested in the railroad's Canadian operations. You live around the states of Alabama and Georgia, and you appreciate how underrated they are considering that, aside from the NS Heritage Unit, I don't see many people talk about the Central of Georgia. You're a hoarder, and fill up your basement with everything under the goddamn sun. By that logic, you have a whole roster at your disposal, but you just leave everything to absolute rot! Wait, you know about them? That's a first. Even through them wearing CN and Grand Trunk colors. You dig the color palette that they have, and you hate how a certain shithole of a railroad screwed over their business. You're another coal-hauling railroad simp with one of your strongest personalities being electric locomotives and having literal clones of CNO steam locomotives. I'm gonna be honest, you prefer the name Music City Star and when they rostered a Surfliner F40. What can I say? You're a locale to whatever shortline comes to your mind and just love that they aren't going all PSR and shit. And just like the quaint, relaxed nature of their operations, and probably because they're still using first-gen EMDs somehow. Are you an edgelord or do you condone crappy working conditions? You love being out in the wilderness. You enjoy the Alaska's diesels, and think the Prime E-Bells are the next M&M. Also, bonus points if you remember their steam locomotives. Anyways, bye.